The smell of frying bacon drifted through the front door every time someone entered Betty's roadside diner. Grace Howard wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that morning, her hands moving on autopilot, while her mind cataloged which tables needed refills and who was ready for their check. The breakfast rush hit hard on farming colonies like New Landing, where people rose before the sun and needed hot food before heading out to the fields or the mines. She noticed him the moment he walked through the door. Not because he looked particularly unusual, though his clothes were clearly expensive and out of place among the work boots and dust-covered coveralls that filled her diner. No, she noticed him because of the way he moved. Too careful, too measured, like someone afraid of bumping into things or taking up too much space. Grace had seen that kind of caution before in soldiers fresh from combat zones, people who had learned the hard way that relaxing could get you killed. The stranger chose the corner booth, sliding into the seat with his back to the wall. His eyes swept the room once, taking in every exit and every person. Grace finished pouring coffee for old Ben at the counter and grabbed a menu from the stack by the register. The diner was packed, every table full of regulars who knew each other's names and families. The noise level was friendly chaos, people calling out greetings and sharing the morning news. When Grace finally made it to the corner booth, the stranger was staring at the laminated menu like it contained secrets of the universe. Up close, she could see his eyes were an odd shade of gold, almost metallic in the morning light streaming through the windows. His fingers were long and elegant, the kind of hands that had never done manual labor. "Morning," Grace said, pulling her order pad from her apron pocket. "What can I get you?" The stranger looked up at her, and for just a moment something flickered across his face. Surprise maybe, or confusion, like he had expected something different from her greeting. "I will have eggs," he said slowly. His voice was deep and had an odd quality to it, almost musical. "And whatever bread is fresh, scrambled, fried, or over easy." "Scrambled will suffice," Grace smiled. "You got it, coffee?" "Yes." She jotted down the order and turned to head back to the kitchen, but something made her pause. The stranger was scratching at his collar, his jaw tight with what looked like discomfort. "You okay there?" "Fine." The word came out clipped, defensive. Grace shrugged and walked away. She had learned a long time ago not to push people who clearly wanted to be left alone. The galaxy was full of folks running from something or hiding from someone. New Landing attracted that type, people looking for a fresh start on the edge of known space where questions were considered rude and everyone's past was their own. Business outlord Dravenor watched the human waitress disappear into the kitchen and tried to calm the itching beneath his biosuit. The disguise was state-of-the-art, worth more than most starships, designed to let dragons move freely among lesser species without causing panic. But it had never itched like this before. He shifted in the uncomfortable booth and wondered again why he had stopped at this insignificant diner on this insignificant colony world. The original plan had been simple: arrive at New Landing, assess the mining potential, make the colonists an offer they would accept out of desperation rather than fairness, and leave with the mineral rights that would make him even richer. He had done it 1,000 times on 1,000 worlds. Humans were predictable, easily impressed by displays of wealth and power. But that waitress, Grace according to her name tag, had looked at him like he was just another customer. No fear, no awe, no calculation about how much she could extract from someone wearing clothes that cost more than her yearly income. Just a simple smile and a question about eggs. Dravenor found it deeply unsettling. Around him, the diner continued its noisy rhythm. At the counter, an elderly human was counting out coins for his breakfast, coming up short. Grace appeared from the kitchen with plates balanced along both arms, distributed them to waiting customers with practiced efficiency, then stopped by the old man. She said something too quiet for Dravenor to hear, removed items from his bill and waved away his protests. The old man's eyes were wet when he left. At a nearby table, a young mother struggled with twin infants who would not stop crying. Grace delivered Dravenor's order on her next pass, eggs that smelled better than they had any right to, then detoured to the mother's table. She picked up one of the crying babies without asking permission, showed the exhausted mother some kind of gentle swaying motion, and within moments both infants had quieted. The mother looked ready to weep with gratitude. Dravenor ate his eggs slowly, watching the constant small kindnesses that flowed through the diner like water. A sick transport driver was given soup and medicine at no charge. A nervous teenager was reassured about a job interview. Two farmers arguing about water rights were guided to a compromise before their dispute could escalate. It made no sense. In dragon culture, resources flowed upward to those with power. Generosity was weakness. Helping those beneath you in the hierarchy was foolish, because it gave them no incentive to climb higher themselves. Yet this small diner in the middle of nowhere operated on completely different principles, and somehow it worked. People smiled. They thanked each other. They came back. Grace refilled his coffee without being asked. "How are those eggs?" "Adequate," Dravener said, though in truth they were the best eggs he had tasted in years. Rich, perfectly seasoned, cooked with actual care rather than mere technical competence. "High praise," Grace said, and there was something in her voice. Not mockery exactly, but gentle amusement. Like she could tell he was lying, but found it endearing rather than offensive. She moved on to other tables before he could respond. Dravenor finished his breakfast in silence, his mind working through calculations that suddenly seemed hollow. He had been planning to destroy this place, to scatter these people across the stars so he could extract ore from beneath their feet. It was business. Nothing personal. But watching Grace laugh with her customers, remembering the way she had helped the old man and the young mother and the sick driver, Dravenor felt something he had not experienced in 8 centuries. Doubt. 3 days passed before Dravenor returned to the diner. He told himself it was research, a more thorough examination of the colony's social structures before finalizing the mining deal. Dragons were nothing if not thorough in their business ventures. The fact that he had thought about Grace's smile more than once during those 3 days meant nothing. The lunch crowd was thinner than breakfast had been. Farmers came and went quickly, grabbing sandwiches before heading back to their fields. Dravenor chose a different seat this time, at the counter rather than the isolated corner booth. The change in habit felt strange and slightly dangerous, like he was admitting something to himself he did not want to examine too closely. Grace appeared from the back room carrying a tray of clean glasses. She saw him and her face lit up with genuine pleasure, not the calculated welcome he usually received from people who recognized his wealth. "Well, look who came back. Coffee? Please." She poured from a pot that had been sitting too long, the coffee dark and probably bitter, but Dravenor found he did not mind. Grace set down a menu, but he waved it away. "The eggs were good. I will have them again." Coming right up, an older man 3 seats down leaned over. His face was weathered like old leather, his hands scarred from decades of work. "You new to the colony?" Dravenor's first instinct was to ignore the question. Dragons did not make small talk with humans. But something about the man's open curiosity, completely free of threat or judgment, made him answer. "I am visiting on business." "What kind of business?" "Mining surveys." It was not quite a lie, the old man nodded. "Name's Ben. Worked the mines here for 40 years before my back gave out. Good deposits in the northern range, if that's what you're looking at." "I appreciate the information." Ben laughed. "Information's free around here. Not like the core worlds where everything's got a price tag. You'll find new landings different. We take care of our own." Grace delivered Dravenor's eggs and lingered for a moment. "Ben here was one of the first settlers. If you want to know about the colony, he's your man." "Aw, Grace is just being kind," which she's too good at for her own wallet. Ben winked at her. "Saw you comp Jimmy's breakfast again yesterday. Jimmy's family is struggling. His daughter needs medical treatment they can't afford." "And you can?" Ben's voice was gentle, concerned rather than critical. "I manage." Grace refilled both their coffee cups. "We all do what we can, right?" She moved down the counter to help another customer. Ben watched her go with affection clear on his face. "Lost her boy 5 years back. Mining accident over in the western caves. Some corporation cut corners on safety equipment to save money. Grace could have left, gone somewhere that wouldn't remind her. Instead, she stays and makes sure everyone else feels looked after. She's the heart of this place." The words hit Dravenor harder than they should have. He ate his eggs mechanically, barely tasting them. A son lost to corporate greed. It was the kind of story he had heard 1,000 times and never cared about. Collateral damage in the pursuit of profit. The strong survived and the weak were swept aside. That was how the universe worked. Except here in this small diner, the universe seemed to work differently. Over the next hour, Dravenor watched and listened. Ben told stories about the colony's early days, The struggles to make the land productive, the droughts and equipment failures and times when it seemed like everything would fall apart. But through every crisis, the colonists had helped each other. Shared resources, shared knowledge, shared hope. Why stay? Dravenor asked finally. Why not move to a wealthier system, somewhere with more opportunities? Ben looked at him like he had asked why people needed to breathe. Because this is home. Because these are my people. You can't put a price on that. But you could, Dravenor thought. He had calculated exactly that price. The colonists would be offered enough money to relocate. Not enough to maintain their current quality of life, but enough that they could not legally refuse. It was standard practice. Clean, efficient, profitable. A commotion near the door interrupted his thoughts. Two miners pushed through, voices raised in anger. They were arguing about claim boundaries, each accusing the other of encroaching on their territory. The argument escalated quickly, one man shoving the other. Grace was between them before Dravenor even registered that she had moved. She was not a large woman, barely came up to their shoulders, but she stood there with absolute calm. Not in my diner. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the anger like a blade. You want to fight, you take it outside and you don't come back. You want to solve this, you sit down and I'll bring coffee and we'll talk it through. Your choice. The two miners stared at her. For a moment, Dravenor thought they would push past her, continue their fight. Then something in their postures changed. They looked ashamed. Sorry, Grace, one muttered. Didn't mean to cause trouble, added the other. I know you didn't. Sit. She pointed to a booth. I'll be right there. They sat. Grace poured 3 cups of coffee and joined them. Dravenor could not hear the quiet conversation that followed, but he watched as Grace listened to both sides, asked questions, and somehow guided them to an agreement that had both men shaking hands by the time they left. She returned to the counter looking tired. Dravenor studied her face and saw the lines of grief there, permanent marks from a loss that would never fully heal. Yet she had just prevented violence with nothing but moral authority and genuine care for 2 men who were strangers to her. How do you do that? The question escaped before he could stop it. Do what? Lead without force. Resolve conflict without power? Grace smiled, sad and wise. Force and power just make people scared. Scared people don't heal, they just hide their hurt until it explodes. You want real peace, you have to actually care about the people involved. That seems inefficient. Maybe, but it works, and everyone sleeps better at night. She studied his face with those 2 knowing eyes. You come from somewhere that does things different? Very different. Must be lonely. The word struck him like a physical blow. Lonely. Was that what the hollow feeling had been all these centuries? Dravenor had assumed it was merely the natural state of dragon existence, the price of superiority. But watching Grace move through her diner, connected to everyone around her by invisible threads of care and history and mutual support, he wondered if he had been wrong about everything. Dravenor reached for his credit chip as Grace placed the bill on the counter. The meal had cost less than the water he drank on his ship. He prepared to pay 10 times the amount, a gesture meant to demonstrate his superiority while appearing generous. It was a game he had played on countless worlds, a way to remind lesser beings of the vast gulf between their stations. But when he picked up the small plastic tray that held his bill, something else came with it. A napkin, folded once with handwriting visible through the thin paper. Dravenor glanced up. Grace was already across the diner, refilling coffee for a table of miners. Her attention seemingly elsewhere. He unfolded the napkin. The handwriting was simple, unpracticed. The letters slightly uneven, like someone who wrote by hand rarely in this age of digital communication. The message was short. I don't know what you're hiding from or what hurts so badly that you wrap yourself in gold and distance, but you're welcome here. You don't have to pretend to be something you're not. Not in my diner. Come back when you're ready to be real. It was signed with just her first name. Grace. Dravenor stared at the words until they blurred. His biosuit itched fiercely, responding to the surge of emotions he could not name or control. The note should have been impossible. His disguise was military-grade technology, foolproof against all known scanning methods. Even other dragons would struggle to see through it without extended observation. Yet this human waitress had seen through him in 2 visits. Not to his physical form, perhaps, but to something deeper. The loneliness he carried like armor, the emptiness he filled with wealth that never satisfied. The pretense of being above emotion when really he was drowning in feelings he had spent centuries learning to ignore. Grace had seen him, actually seen him, and instead of using that knowledge as leverage or treating him with fear, she had simply offered welcome. No conditions, no expectations, no calculations about what she might gain, just an invitation to be real. Dravenor's hand shook slightly as he placed the credit chip back in his pocket. He left exact change for the meal plus a reasonable tip, not the excessive amount he had planned. Something told him Grace would not appreciate being bought. He folded the napkin carefully and tucked it into his inside pocket, against the place where a human heart would beat. Outside the diner, New Landing's sun was bright and warm. The colony spread out before him, modest buildings made from local stone and imported metal, fields of grain rippling in the breeze, the distant mountains where the mining operations scarred the landscape. It was not beautiful by any objective standard. Nothing like the glittering dragon cities he called home, where every surface was precious metal and every structure a monument to accumulated wealth. But standing there in the sunlight, Dravenor felt something he had not experienced in so long he barely recognized it. A pull, a wanting, a desire to return not for business or profit but simply to be in that space again, to sit at the counter and listen to Ben's stories, to watch Grace move through the chaos with calm competence, to be part of something that felt, impossibly, like it might matter more than money. He spread his awareness, a dragon sense that could detect others of his kind across vast distances. Nothing. The nearest dragon was at least 30 light years away. No one here knew what he truly was. No one could judge him by the harsh standards of dragon culture, where showing weakness meant becoming prey and admitting loneliness was unthinkable. What if he did not have to be Lord Dravenor, merchant prince of the third flight, worth more than most planetary economies? What if he could simply be someone else, someone new, someone who might learn how to connect the way these humans did so easily? The thought terrified him more than any business rival or physical threat ever had. Dravenor walked back to his ship, a sleek vessel that could house 100 beings comfortably, but held only him and his horde. The empty corridors echoed with his footsteps. The piles of precious metals and rare gems gleamed under artificial lights, beautiful and cold and utterly meaningless. He pulled out the napkin and read it again. Come back when you're ready to be real. Was he ready? Could he even remember how to be real after 8 centuries of being a walking calculation, a creature of pure transaction and accumulated power? Dragons did not have friends. They had assets, alliances of convenience, temporary partnerships built on mutual benefit. The idea of connection without profit margin was as foreign to him as breathing water. But Grace had offered it anyway. Not because she wanted something from him, but because she seemed to operate on completely different principles. Principles that said people had value beyond their utility, that community was built through care rather than commerce, that the strongest thing you could do was admit you needed others. Dravenor sat in his empty ship and thought about the diner. The noise and warmth and smell of good food, the way people knew each other's names and troubles, the casual generosity that flowed without expectation of return, Ben's stories about struggle and survival through mutual aid, Grace's tired smile that somehow still held hope. He thought about his mining deal, the contracts waiting to be signed that would destroy all of it. The colonists would be scattered, their community broken, their home turned into an industrial site. It was business. Clean, profitable, legal. Everything dragon culture valued. But what did he value? The question haunted him through the night. By morning, he had made a decision that would have seemed insane 3 days ago. He would return to the diner, not to finalize his business deal, not to observe subjects for profit, but simply to see what happened, to try, however awkwardly, to learn what these humans knew that he had forgotten or perhaps never learned. He would go back and try to be real, whatever that meant. Even if it terrified him, even if it meant risking the armor of indifference he had built so carefully over centuries, even if Grace's kindness turned out to be something he could not understand or reciprocate. The napkin stayed in his pocket, the words memorized, a small piece of paper that weighed more than all the gold in his hoard. Dravenor became a regular over the next 2 weeks. He arrived each morning at 8, after the initial breakfast rush but before the diner emptied completely. He always sat at the counter now, in the third seat from the left where he could see both the kitchen and the front door. Grace never commented on his consistency, just poured his coffee and took his order with that same knowing smile. The other regulars accepted him with the casual friendliness that seemed to be the default setting for humans on frontier colonies. Nobody asked about his past or his business. They simply absorbed him into their routines, including him in conversations about weather and crop yields and the upcoming festival, celebrating the colony's founding. "You should come," Ben said one morning, gesturing with a fork full of eggs. "Whole colony turns out. Food, music, dancing. Grace here makes her famous apple pie for the dessert table." "I do not dance," Dravener said. "Neither do I since my knees went bad, but I still go for the company." Ben sipped his coffee. "Where are you from originally, friend? You got an accent I can't quite place." Dravener had prepared a cover story, a boring tale about growing up on a mining station in a forgotten system, but looking at Ben's open, curious face, the lie stuck in his throat. "Very far from here. A place with different customs. Well, New Landing's good at welcoming different. We got folks from maybe 30 different worlds all trying to make something work together. That's what makes it special." Ben lowered his voice. "Grace don't talk about it much, but after she lost her boy, a lot of us thought she'd leave. Too many memories here. But she stayed because this is community, you know. These are her people. That kind of belonging, you don't walk away from it." Dravenor nodded, unsure what to say. Belonging was not a dragon concept. Dragons existed in hierarchies, not communities. You knew your place in the order, knew who could dominate you and who you could dominate in turn. It was clear, simple, brutal. This human idea of choosing to stay in a place because of emotional connections rather than strategic advantage made no logical sense. Yet he kept returning to the diner. He started helping without meaning to. When Grace's hands were full, he would refill coffee for nearby customers. When a new family came in looking lost, he found himself explaining the menu. Small things. Automatic gestures that would have been unthinkable in his previous life. Dragons did not serve others. That was for lesser beings. But here, service did not mean subservience. Grace was clearly the most respected person in the diner. Yet she spent her days serving food and cleaning tables. The contradiction puzzled him until he realized it was not a contradiction at all. Leadership through care rather than dominance. Power that flowed from trust rather than fear. One morning, a teenager came in crying, clearly upset. Grace sat down beside her immediately. "What happened, Sophie?" "I didn't get into the academy. The off-world one I applied to." The girl wiped her eyes. "I really thought I had a chance. I'm sorry, sweetie." "That's really disappointing. Mom and Dad saved for years to afford the application fee, and I wasted it." Grace took the girl's hand. "You didn't waste anything. You tried. That takes courage. And you know what? New Landing Technical School is pretty good. My friend Rachel teaches there and she says their graduates do just fine. But I wanted to leave. To see other worlds, I know. And maybe you still will, just on a different path than you expected." Grace squeezed her hand. Life's like that sometimes. The door you want slams shut. But if you pay attention, usually a window opens somewhere else. The girl left looking marginally better. Dravenor watched Grace return to work. Her own grief carefully hidden but visible to anyone who knew to look for it. She had lost her child and stayed anyway. Kept serving, kept caring, kept building something meaningful from the ruins of her loss. How did humans do that? How did they survive such pain and come out still capable of kindness? "You're thinking loud thoughts over there," Grace said, refilling his cup. "Want to share?" "I was thinking about strength," Dravenor said carefully. "In my culture, strength means never showing weakness. Never admitting pain or need. Sounds exhausting. It is." The admission surprised him. "How do you do it?" "Stay strong after losing your son?" Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "I'm not sure I am strong. Most days I just get through, you know. Put one foot in front of the other. Make breakfast for folks who need it. Try to be useful." She looked at him directly. "But I learned something after Bobby died. Keeping pain locked inside doesn't make you strong. It just makes you sick. Real strength is letting people help carry it with you. Dragons do not share burdens." The word slipped out before he could stop it. Dravenor froze, expecting questions or fear. But Grace just nodded like he had confirmed something she already knew. "Well, dragons might want to reconsider that policy, because humans figured out a long time ago that we survive by taking care of each other. Pack animals, that's us. We're not much on our own, but together we can handle almost anything." A customer called for more coffee and Grace moved away. Dravenor sat motionless, his mind reeling. She had not reacted to the word dragon. Either she thought he was speaking metaphorically, or she actually knew and did not care. Both possibilities seemed impossible. That evening, as he prepared to leave, Grace handed him a small wrapped package. Apple pie. For the road. I cannot accept this. Sure you can. I made extra. Her eyes were kind but firm. And you look like you could use something sweet in your life. Dravener took the package with hands that trembled slightly. Thank you. You're welcome. And friend. She waited until he met her eyes. Whatever you're running from or hiding from, you're safe here. In my diner, everyone gets to just be themselves. No judgment, no pressure. You remember that. Walking back to his ship, Dravener carried the apple pie like it was made of precious gems. It was still warm through the wrapping. The gesture, the kindness, the simple human decency of it all was more valuable than anything in his hoard. That night he ate the pie alone in his empty ship and wondered what he was becoming. The dragons arrived on a Tuesday, their ship blotting out the morning sun as it descended toward the landing field outside New Landing. Dravenor felt them before he saw them, that distinctive pressure in his mind that signaled others of his kind nearby. His coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. That's a big ship, Ben observed from 2 seats over. You expecting company? Dravenor set down the cup carefully. Unfortunately, yes. 3 dragons in full form emerged from the vessel, scales gleaming red, bronze, and deep purple in the sunlight. They made no attempt to disguise themselves. A deliberate show of superiority. Humans scattered from the landing field, fear overriding curiosity. Within minutes, word would spread through the colony. Dragons had come to New Landing. Dravenor knew why they were here. He had been stalling on the mining contracts for 2 weeks, making excuses, asking for more time to survey. His partners had grown impatient. Now they had come to close the deal themselves, or more likely, to see what had delayed him. Dragons did not tolerate weakness or sentiment in business matters. Grace appeared beside him. Friends of yours? Business partners. The words tasted bitter. They have come for the mining contracts, the ones you've been surveying. It was not a question. Grace had always been too observant for her own good, or maybe for his. The ones that would require the colony to relocate? Dravenor looked at her sharply. How did you know? I didn't, not for sure. But you've been watching us like you were trying to memorize everything, like someone who knows it might disappear. She topped off his coffee with steady hands. How bad is it? The deposits beneath New Landing are worth more than 100 colony worlds. My partners will offer you minimal compensation. Legally, you cannot refuse. Can't fight dragons, you mean? No one fights dragons and wins. Grace was quiet for a moment. Outside, the 3 dragons were making their way toward town, their movements powerful and unhurried. People pressed themselves against buildings, staying out of their path. It was the natural order of things. Dragons were apex predators, the pinnacle of the galactic hierarchy. Everyone else existed at their sufferance. You could fight them, Grace said softly. If you wanted to. Dravenor's laugh was hollow. I am one. They are 3. And beyond them are dozens more who would come if I opposed dragon interests. You do not understand what you ask. Maybe not, but I understand that you've been sitting in my diner every morning for 2 weeks, and you've been happier each day. I've watched you learn how to smile, how to talk to people without calculating what you'll get from them. You've been learning how to be part of something instead of above it. She met his eyes. That person you're becoming, would he let this happen? The question struck him like a physical blow, would he? The old Dravener Lord of the Third Flight absolutely would. Business was business. Sentiment was weakness. The strong dominated the weak and called it progress. But that Dravener had been profoundly lonely for 800 years. That Dravenor had never tasted apple pie given freely by someone who expected nothing in return. Had never heard Ben's stories or watched humans build community through small acts of care. Had never felt the warmth of being welcomed not for what he owned but for who he might become. I do not know, he whispered. Then I guess you need to decide. Grace squeezed his shoulder briefly, a gesture of comfort and support. Whatever you choose, you're still welcome in my diner. I don't turn away friends. She moved to greet other customers, her calm presence steadying the growing panic as news of the dragons spread. Dravenor sat frozen, his coffee growing cold, his mind racing through calculations that suddenly seemed meaningless. The 3 dragons entered the diner an hour later. They had to duck to fit through the doorway, their bulk making the space feel cramped. Conversations died. The few customers present pressed themselves against the walls. Dravenor. The red dragon, his name was Rothkar, spoke in the old language. You have been here long enough. Time to conclude business. I am still surveying, Dravenor replied in the same tongue. The surveys are complete. We know what lies beneath this settlement. Now you make them the offer and we extract our profit. Rothkar's eyes swept the diner dismissively. Unless these primitives have addled your mind with their weakness. The bronze dragon laughed, a sound like rocks grinding. Look at him, sitting at their feeding trough like a pet. Perhaps he has gone native. Perhaps he has forgotten who he is, added the purple dragon, her voice sharp with contempt. Dravenor felt his biosuit begin to fail, his emotions too strong to contain. Power radiated from him in waves, the temperature in the diner dropping several degrees. Several humans gasped. I have forgotten nothing, Shalara. I simply see more clearly than before. Clearly? Rothkar moved closer, deliberately intimidating. You see primitive apes who will be dead in a century. We are eternal. This colony means nothing. It means something to them. Since when do we care what lesser species value? Shalara's tail lashed. You were chosen for this venture because you were ruthless, efficient. Now you hesitate over human sentiment? Grace appeared with a coffee pot, walking between the dragons like they were simply large customers. The sheer audacity of it shocked them into silence. She filled Dravenor's cup with steady hands. You folks want anything? We have eggs, pancakes, fresh bread. Rothkar stared at her. Do you know what we are, human? Dragons, clearly. Pretty obvious once you see the scales and wings. Grace met his eyes without fear. But in my diner, everyone's a customer first. So I'll ask again, you want breakfast? We want the land under your feet, your settlement raised, and your people scattered. Rothkar's voice dripped with contempt. That is what we want. Well, that's not on the menu. But I make excellent scrambled eggs, the purple dragon hissed. This is why we do not deal directly with lesser species. They lack proper respect. Something in Dravenor's chest, something frozen for centuries, cracked and shattered. He stood, his biosuit failing completely now. His true form began to manifest, emerald scales replacing false flesh, wings pushing through the disguise that no longer held. Enough. The biosuit tore apart like tissue paper. Dravenor's true form expanded to fill the diner. 15 feet of emerald scales and ancient power. His wings brushed the ceiling, his tail coiled against the wall. The transformation shattered several glasses and sent chairs skittering across the floor. Humans screamed and ran for the exits. Ben stumbled backward. Only Grace remained still, coffee pot in hand, looking up at him with those two knowing eyes. So that is what you were hiding, she said quietly. Does it feel better being honest? The simple question, asked with such calm acceptance, nearly undid him completely. Dravenor turned to face his fellow dragons, his voice carrying harmonics that made the windows rattle. I said enough. This colony will not be touched. Rothkar laughed, genuine amusement coloring the sound. Have you lost your mind? You reveal yourself to these primitives to defend them? They are nothing. Resources to be managed and relocated. They are people trying to build something meaningful. That makes them worth more than all the ore beneath their feet. Since when does meaning factor into profit calculations? Shalara moved closer, her posture aggressive. You have gone soft, Dravenor. This is embarrassing. No. Dravenor spread his wings, a threat display. What is embarrassing is spending 8 centuries accumulating wealth I never enjoyed. Power I never valued. Respect that was only fear wearing a mask. I have been rich and utterly poor at the same time. These humans showed me the difference. The bronze dragon snorted. They showed you weakness, sentiment, the very things that keep lesser species inferior. They showed me connection, community, the courage to care about something beyond yourself. Dravenor's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. I am done with your way. The mining deal is cancelled. New landing remains. Rothkar's eyes narrowed. You cannot cancel what was never yours alone to decide. We are partners in this venture. The contracts will be honored with or without you. Then it will be without me, and you will have to go through me to reach them. Silence fell over the diner. Even for dragons, the statement was shocking. Dragons did not fight each other over lesser species. The very idea violated every cultural norm they held. Shalara looked genuinely confused. You would battle your own kind for humans? For these brief, fragile creatures who will be dust before you are middle-aged? Yes. The word came easily, bringing with it a lightness Dravener had not felt in centuries. Because brief and fragile does not mean worthless. Because they understand something we forgot or never learned. That connection is the only real wealth. That generosity creates abundance rather than depleting it. That leadership means serving those who trust you, not dominating those weaker than yourself. Rothkar's scales rippled, a sign of deep anger. Then you are no longer dragon. You will be cast out, exiled from our territories and councils. Your horde will be forfeit. Your name will be struck from the histories. You will be nothing. Dravenor thought about his empty ship, the piles of meaningless treasure. He thought about Grace's apple pie and Ben's stories and the way humans said good morning like they meant it. He thought about the napkin in his pocket, offering welcome without conditions. I was nothing before I came here. Powerful, wealthy, feared, respected, but fundamentally nothing. These humans gave me a chance to be something real. He looked at Grace, who still stood there with her coffee pot and her steady gaze. I will take exile if that is the price. The three dragons stared at him for a long moment. Finally, Rothkar shook his head in disgust. You are insane. Lost to some human madness. Very well, the exile is pronounced. You are no longer one of us. They left, their departure as dramatic as their arrival. The diner felt cavernous in their absence. Slowly, people began to emerge from where they had hidden. Ben appeared from behind the counter, his face pale but his expression curious rather than afraid. So, he said carefully, you're a dragon. I am. Dravenor tried to shrink himself to seem less threatening, but there was only so much he could do at his true size. I apologize for the deception. Deception? Grace set down her coffee pot and looked around at the mess. You were figuring yourself out. That's not the same thing as lying. She picked up a fallen chair and set it upright. Question is, what happens now? Now I am exiled from my people. My fortune is forfeit. I have nothing. Dravenor found himself smiling despite everything. It is remarkably freeing. You have skills though, right? Big strong dragon, probably good at heavy lifting. Colony could use that. Ben was grinning now, warming to the idea. And you're pretty smart, could help with the mining operations. Make sure they're done safe, not like those corporations that cut corners. I know mining extensively, Dravenor admitted. I could ensure proper safety protocols. See? Not nothing at all. Grace started cleaning up broken glass. You got a place to stay, or is that ship leaving with your partners? The ship is mine. Paid for long ago. Good. Then you have housing and transportation. That's more than some folks start with. She looked up at him, and her smile was warm enough to melt the last of his ancient ice. Welcome to New Landing, Dravenor. For real this time. Over the following weeks, Dravenor learned what it meant to be part of a community. He helped establish mining operations that prioritized safety over speed, ensuring no more families would lose children to preventable accidents. His knowledge of galactic markets helped the colonists get fair prices for their ore. His physical strength rebuilt structures damaged by storms. But more than his practical contributions, he learned what it meant to have friends. To share meals not as business transactions but as genuine connection. To listen to stories and tell some of his own, editing less as people proved they could handle the truth. To be known, really known, and still be welcome. Grace never charged him for breakfast. He never argued about it. Instead, he paid in other ways. Fixing her roof, helping with supply runs, teaching her some of the old dragon recipes that translated surprisingly well to human ingredients. The note, the one that had started everything, was now framed and hanging on the diner wall. Grace said it was false advertising to claim people could be real in her diner without proof, and Dravenor was proof that anyone could belong if they were willing to try. On the morning of the colony's Founding Day festival, Dravenor sat at his usual spot at the counter. The diner was full of people preparing food, decorating, laughing. Grace poured his coffee and set down a plate of eggs without being asked. You going to the festival tonight? She asked. I do not dance. Good thing there's more to do than dance. Food, music, company. You know, all the things that make life worth living. I will attend. Dravenor sipped his coffee. Still too bitter, but somehow perfect. Thank you, Grace. For what? For seeing me. For the note. For giving me permission to be real. Grace smiled and patted his scaled forearm. That's what friends do. We give each other permission to be ourselves, help carry the heavy stuff, and share pie when things are good. She moved to help another customer, calling back over her shoulder, "Besides, you've earned your place here. You chose people over profit. In my book, that makes you exactly the kind of person this colony needs." A young child approached cautiously, eyes wide at Dravenor's size. "Mr. Dragon, can you reach the high shelf? Mommy needs the sugar." Dravenor carefully retrieved the sugar container and handed it down. The child thanked him solemnly and ran off. Such a small thing being helpful. Such a small thing that filled the emptiness better than gold ever had. Through the diner windows, Dravenor could see New Landing spread out under the morning sun. Not wealthy, not glamorous, but real, home. His Ben sat down beside him. "Ready for tonight?" "Fair warning, Grace's apple pie goes fast. You want a slice, you get there early. I will remember that. Good man. Dragon. Friend. Whatever." Ben raised his coffee cup. "Here's to finding where you belong." Dravenor touched his cup to Ben's, the gesture still awkward but getting easier. "To belonging," he agreed. And for the first time in 800 years, he meant it.